Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and it's lovely to have you join me. Now, today's topic, we're going to be talking about perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause. So it's really a topic for all women, and I'm hoping that you're going to share it with some of your younger friends who are probably going through perimenopause. My guest today is Dr. Tayo, founder of Back to Sassy. She turned her own perimenopausal struggles into a transformative initiative for women in midlife and beyond. Dr. Tayo created her Synergistic Hormone Balancing System, a natural, total woman and science-backed framework. This supports women struggling on their menopause journey and is based on a concept she calls Menopause 3.0. which is the powerful cutting-edge way that ensures management is centered around each woman's requirements as an individual. Her charismatic demeanor in discussing this complex subject has garnered attention from networks like ABC, CBS, NBC, and Google News. Dr. Tayo's innovative approach equips high-achieving women to quickly and safely reignite their vitality, boost their productivity and confidence so they can continue to excel in their professional lives and enjoy rich personal lives. Now, as I said, this conversation is going to be for all of us, so I hope you enjoy it, and let's go to the conversation now. Welcome, Dr. Tayo. It's so lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you, Sue. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, me too. Hopefully, I'm going to get some answers that will help me personally as well as for the listeners. So before we get started, I just would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background and the work that you do.
Okay. Fundamentally, by training, I'm a physician. I trained, in medicine. I specialized in radiology, multiple board certified. And somewhere along the line, when I was, things were rocking and rolling, I hit what I now know is menopause. But I didn't realize it at the time because our medical training was very short on that aspect of it. They just didn't give us enough information for me to know what was a hot flush, how did it feel, anything. But I only knew some of the things by looking backwards once I had those hot flashes, and that was while I was at work. Anyway, I went on conventional treatment, the good person, physician that I am, followed the rules, and somehow did not work as well as it should have done. I just put all my faith in it. And when I realized it wasn't working through a series of events, I decided I needed to do something different, which means look outside the usual box that I knew and I was familiar with, and gradually taking bit by bit experiments, etc., here and there, I started getting success, particularly when I stopped the conventional treatment, which is hormone treatment. And I realized, oh my gosh, there are many people out there who don't even have the access to some of the information and the ability to do research, etc., and look into things that I have. So, over a period of time, that's exactly what I decided to do. It just was so rewarding to find people now saying, oh, guess what? We can actually ride this out, breeze through it without doing things that were either dangerous or noxious or taking, things that were not really good for you, and without it being stressful, really.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
it
mm.
does take some, change of habits, but it's not stressful by any means. And the fact is that the reward at the end of it is a lifetime reward and lots of confidence and unstoppable energy.
I know when I was perimenopause and then going through menopause, no one really wanted to know about it, and there was
Mm. Why is this frozen? Okay. This is freezing.
if there was a history of cancer in the family or breast cancer, you didn't have hormone replacement therapy. And there was a lot of misinformation out there. And I just actually went through not really knowing what was happening. And I'm so pleased that people like yourself have done the research and been able to answer some of the many questions that I know that I would have wondered about when I was going through things. And I just thought, oh, well, I've just got to grin and bear it all and go through. And I think the one thing that helped me was that I got into exercising and running. And I think that helped me get through things. But it was a stressful time. And I think mentally as well as physically.
Yes.
So, maybe we can talk a little bit about that because it was, yeah, trying to get people to understand. The doctors didn't want to know, they didn't really have enough information. And it was just more or less, well, that's just part of life, you'll get through it.
I know. Isn't that, that is so off-putting because they treat menopause as if, and I use the word treat cautiously because it's not a disease. You're not treating a disease. You're managing something and making things better for something that's a natural phase. Puberty is natural, so is menopause. It's not
Mm,
something that, and unfortunately, because of I believe there's a lot of patriarchy involved in it, who don't really want us to go through it, to have our voices heard, because there's honestly nothing more powerful than a woman who has gone through all those things, gone through menopause, and who finds herself because she doesn't have all the baggage that comes with all the period before menopause, you see. And a lot of people live in fear of a woman who is assertive, and they call us all kinds of, noxious, perjurious names. And you go to, as you said, you go to doctors. They either tell you nothing can be done, it's normal, suck it up and bear it, pull up your big girl panties, and don't do anything useful for you. And there is a world of things you can do to help yourself that is natural, that doesn't involve taking, starving yourself or flat out gym rat. None of that stuff is necessary.
mm. And there, I have noticed over the last, I'd say 3 years, there is so much on social media where, especially for example on Instagram, everyone is a menopause expert now, and there's so many varying ideas and information, and that can be just as confusing as not having enough information. So, what are some of your thoughts? Like, what were some of the things that you learnt from your own experience?
What I learned from my experience is okay, a few things. One, you have to be aware of it. You have to be aware of perimenopause is a relatively new word to explain to people that where the majority of the symptoms happen is the period before menopause. Menopause is a date in time. And
Mm,
most people don't, they take it as the entire journey. It is just one point in that journey. And the period before, which is the period when your hormones decline, is called perimenopause. And even that period, it starts so subtly. And most women, like myself, unfortunately, which is embarrassing, don't aware are not aware that perimenopause is in flow until you get something like a hot flush, which basically sets you back. But there are subtle signs before then that if you paid attention, you'd need to have felt so close to the wall,
mm,
and just thinking, how am I going to survive? I'm tired. I'm, barely keeping my eyelids open. Low productivity. You just don't know what's going on. If you're aware that once you're hit 40s as a female, your hormones have started declining, but it's
mm,
slow, and the symptoms are just the kind of things you will attribute to stress. I can't sleep properly. My energy is low. I keep on spinning my wheels. I'm forgetting a few things, the things that used to be on my, top tip of my tongue. And you think, it's because I'm so stressed. It's
Mm,
not. It's because, and if you pay attention, your periods have altered in some way. Either, come too closely, it's erratic. Some come
mm,
too close, some come light, some come later, some are heavy, some are light. It's erratic is the key. And most people don't put it all together until they start saying the hot flash, they start having night sweats, they start fanning themselves, and they think, oh, that may be, to do with menopause. And we need to do something about it. Why? Because one, there are consequences to menopause. Menopause is an aging accelerant. Just the act of going through that period
mm,
accelerates the aging process in women.
mm,
And it starts from there, whereby if you don't do anything about it, even if you happen to go through without symptoms, the possibility that you're going to fall ill with chronic diseases is out there, and you don't want to end up in a nursing home, fractures, can't, in a wheelchair or whatever, and other things, obesity, which we know about, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, strokes, dementia, which is twice the rate in women as it is in men. Those kind of things you want to keep away from you.
mm. Now, it was interesting that you said about perimenopause. It is really a new term, isn't it? Because in the past, I know I thought menopause was the period of time that you go through, until your period finishes. But as you say, it's that point in time. Everything else that's happening before is leading up to that. And I think that I felt I was probably very naive in what I knew about things, and I just sort of accepted things as they were going along. And it's a stressful time for your body, and then trying to understand what's happening to you adds to that stress, that mental stress, or why am I feeling this way, or I'm tired all the time, or I'm not sleeping. All these things add up in a mental health way as well as your physical health. So understanding that period of time beforehand, I'm surprised when you're saying there's the subtle signs, because yeah, I think from perhaps our mother's generation and before, they just sort of had a stiff upper lip, and that was it. They just said this is it, and they probably didn't know anything about it either.
They didn't know what was
And
happening.
but in those days they sort of went through and didn't say anything. They just suffered in silence. Whereas I think now there's so much information out there, and you don't feel, I still think there's a way to go to talk about the whole subject, make people feel comfortable talking about it, but we are making strides in that area as well.
Mm. We are definitely making strides, and just to remember that the whole point of having menopause, etc., is a recent phenomenon that happened when we started out living our reproductive lives. Human beings are one of the few people in the animal kingdom who outlive their reproductive life. And that only happened because of advances in medicine, in healthcare, vaccines, etc., immunity. And when that started going off and life expectancy started increasing, then women were living into menopause and beyond. That is a recent
Mm,
phenomenon. Previously, the earth said, guess what? You've produced your babies, you've probably had grandchildren, it's time to go. And that's what's happened to most of the species. Maybe whales and a few other creatures are the exception. So it's a relative phenomenon. Initially, nobody knew what to do. Plus, women have not had a significant role in society enough to advocate for themselves. And so it was completely
mm,
ignored. They're suffering, they're not suffering, who cares? That's the
mm,
attitude.
mm, exactly. Or yes, you just have to put up with it. That's your lot in life, and another another burden that women have to bear. And I think also touching on that, I mean, it's a little bit different these days. Well, perhaps I'm being generalist here, but uh, I remember just coming to a point, and it wasn't at the time that my childbearing days finished. It was a little bit later, and I
Mhm.
realized that, oh, I've had two children, and I thought, oh, I'm never going to have that opportunity again. It didn't mean that I wanted it, but it was just something that that's the end of something.
A
And
finality to it.
yeah, yes. And that's also another area that I don't think we focus on. These days there's a lot more choice and women are choosing not to have children and that sort of
Mm,
thing. But I do think it must still have some little effect to have this feeling, well, even if I wanted to, I don't have that option anymore.
mm. Yeah, because society has tied the existence of women with childbearing. It's like
Yes.
if you don't have children, you are not a woman and you are not worthy of place or space in society. And until
Mm.
we look at women as their own beings, as equal in status to a man as it should be, which means it is what you do. You're not there as a, breeding cow or
Mm.
whatever. You are there
Mm.
in your own right, and to
Mm.
develop yourself as your personality, to contribute to the world, to make sure that you are also the best you can be. And having children or not does not make you a lesser or better woman.
No, exactly. And of course, back when I was younger, the attitude of most of our parents' generation was, well, you're just going to get married and have children. Why do you want to have a career? But fortunately, we've taught our daughters, or hopefully, we've all taught our daughters that that's not necessarily the path she has to take, and that, there are so many options for women these days. And I do think it is improving, maybe not as fast as what we would like, but it definitely is improving.
Oh, I think so. Mm,
Yeah. So let's talk about your synergistic hormone balancing system. I think when we talk about hormones and everything else, that can get a little bit, you really have to take a bit of responsibility to try and educate yourself, don't you, on these sort
absolutely.
of things. But as I said, there's so much information out there now, and some of it, probably like everything, you have to really understand whether it's fact or whether it's just for promotion of somebody. I've got an answer for the menopause problems or perimenopause, and everyone goes, oh great, but you've got to really do your homework and find out what's fact and what's fiction. So let's
Absolutely.
talk about your hormone balancing system, because that's a big area in the of what we go through.
Yes. And the thing is, the basic problem with menopause, perimenopause, is that your hormones are falling off a cliff. And the hormones, particularly estrogen, have a very significant role in our bodily functions. They are in almost every cell of the body. And you can imagine if they help you with your insulin and your energy production and all kinds of things in your brain, in your metabolism, once it starts falling off, it creates a problem. And one thing we know is that there is never one solution to anything, never one. It's like saying you look at the whole body and you say, oh, I'm going to treat your left arm, or I'm going to treat your even your two arms and ignore the rest, or take your head out and ignore the rest. You can't give a whole treatment for the person without taking into consideration your brain, your heart, your muscular system, your digestive system, your kidneys, etc. There are so many things. Some of the others may seem relatively minor, but there are major things that have to go into together, which is what I call synergy. Now,
Hmm.
since we are not, and we've discovered that, yes, I'm not against hormone treatment, by the way, but I don't believe it's the be all and end all. I've been through that, and many people have been through that and have not seen significant relief. I believe it has a place, but it is not the kind of like take it on for years and years and years. Because what you need to do is, what are the functions of those hormones that we need to boost? And realizing that those things have a are involving the entire body means that we have to look at the major systems as a way of making sure that we can actually replicate what we need to replicate and get a good, healthcare system going in our bodies. And that's why it's synergistic. It's a
Hmm.
host of not artificial, but more natural lifestyle factors. And the good thing about it is that when you put them together, it has a compound effect. That's where the synergy comes in. Because if you just ran yourself ragged, you will get a result, maybe, but you're more likely to yo yo as you do with diets. But if you put the things together, the major things together, each small piece, you don't have to do 100% of one piece. You can do
Hmm.
maybe 5, 10, 15%, but you do it depending on what your body needs, and you end up with the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. That's what it's all about. And so it
Mm,
becomes synergistic, and you end up with a system which involves, it's not about just, doing crossword puzzles for your brain. There are other
mm.
things involving your brain. It involves sleep, it involves, your exercises, it involves the food you eat, it involves, stress reduction, and that applies to everything. And if you can
Mm.
put them together in a synergistic way, one that actually allows it to explode and you get fantastic results, you also end up getting results in a much faster and efficient manner.
Mm. And I think that's the issue too. We tend to focus on one thing. So, okay, I've got to exercise, and that helped me. I
Mm,
must admit, the
mm,
symptoms and so forth.
mm.
But that's probably just one little area. Whereas we sort of go, we seem to sort of latch on to one thing and go hell for leather on that and not treat across the board. And I like your idea of the balance that we need in all the areas, because if you think about it, it's logical. If we've got balance in all those areas,
Mm.
then surely we're going to have a much more
You're
balanced,
going
I
to have a
suppose.
much more,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
going to have a greater outcome for sure. You're going to
yes,
have a greater
yes,
outcome.
yeah,
And that's what it's about. You want
yes.
efficiency. You don't want to be spending years, or even several months at a time getting results. You want it to be efficient. At this day and age, luckily we're in an era where we can use science to turbocharge a lot of the things. And so it's a turbocharge mechanism. And it doesn't mean by balancing, I don't mean you do 5% of this and 5% of that and 5% of that. I
No.
mean, maybe you do 5% here, maybe you do 10% there, maybe you do 13% there, maybe you do 2% here. But because everybody's unique and individual and therefore needs personalized solutions.
Yes, and I think that was the problem before. They just say menopause, that's it, and everyone's the same, and this is the treatment that you can is offered to you. And you're right. I mean, everyone is individual. What our bodies are going through, where some of us get certain symptoms, some get others, some get no symptoms, some get all of them, and there's so many symptoms that didn't even realize were part of it all. So you do need that specialized formula, I suppose, for yourself to
Yes.
get the optimal results.
Yes.
So, what sort of things do you talk about with your clients from that area?
Um,
It's not
yeah.
just exercise. I'm sure you cover diet and other areas in
Yes.
life. So,
Yes.
how do you start working with a client to help them find that right recipe, I suppose?
That's a great question because really we look at them and treat them as a whole woman. And in doing so, what can we do? We develop a framework which is based on them, their needs, their wants, their goals, but starting from where they are. So what is the primary problem? It's different in everybody. For some it's sleep, for some it's, weight, for some it's lack of libido. It doesn't matter, but what is the problem you want us to solve for? And then we build a framework on that, even though it's going to end up encompassing what I call, the three pillars. And I have three pillars, three main pillars, and the main pillars are energy generation pillar. It's important. Energy is what keeps us alive, which keeps us upright. And if we get that energy generation pillar going, then we add brain health to it, because without a brain, we might as well not exist. We all
Mm,
want to have, and I discovered, and the same for myself, that we fear not having memory problems. We fear that much more than almost anything alive. So your brain, you have to look at it and say, hey, how am I going to keep that brain function sharp, alive, focused, and productive for as long as I live, as long as possible? And then, of course, there is our ubiquitous challenge in this day and age, which is stress. You need to be able to figure out how to manage it at all times, because chronic stress is also an important factor. See, it's not one thing that is the thing that will take you down, but it's the multiplicity of the things that will take you down, cause stress, cause, weight gain, cause, memory loss, and you need to address those factors in consonance. And once you do, then that's fine. So those are the three main pillars. And
Mm.
within that, those pillars, like I say, energy generation, of course, there's going to be sleep, there's going to be nutrition, and there's going to be movement. And it's not just all about exercise, but you see,
No.
realizing that what we did when we're nice and young and athletic and whatever has to change because of those withdrawal of hormones has to change, and we have to be smart about those changes to give us the things we still want to have into our older and more experienced and more exciting years.
Mm. Mm. And I'm thinking about women like myself who are listening to you and thinking, well, I've been through all that now. I wish I'd known that before. But surely some of those things can be translated into our life after menopause.
Absolutely.
And it's not too late to perhaps, start making changes that we, help us to live, have a better quality of life after that
Yes.
point in time.
I agree completely, because we know, and I do have a few clients who have reached out to me who say, I'm menopausal, but I'm still having trouble sleeping. I'm still exhausted. I'm still kind of like feeling a bit off center, off kilter. What do? We know that there's at least 10% of women who have significant symptoms after menopause. So it's
Mm.
the whole idea of the synergistic hormone balancing system is a lifelong, we develop a framework, which is your own unique framework, which is a lifelong system, which you can always refer to. It's a blueprint for your health going forward. Because if you have good health, even if you fall off the wagon, and we all do, I'm going to
Mm.
put up my hand and say, yes, we do. You know what to do. So you're more likely to go back to it than fold your arms and say, oh, I don't know what to do. That didn't work. And just keep on down the path of binge eating or just not doing your movements or whatever. So once you have that framework and you realize that, oh, guess what? Even if I've gone off, I'm not going to beat myself up too much. I'm just going to brush my tail feathers and get back on the horse of doing what I need to do because I have a framework. It's a
Mm.
framework that is the key to making sure that your health span is almost as long, if not as long as your lifespan. See, there's a difference.
I love that.
There's a
Health span and
difference.
lifespan.
Yeah, there's a difference, because if we look at men and women, women live traditionally longer than men, and yet they are ill for longer in their latter half of life or latter period of life than men are. Men tend to have a nice health span, have a bit of a, have a bit of a downdrift and just, off they go. Women get somewhere and then they're ill. They're more ill. They have all kinds of things going on for a long period of time before, and you find them in same thing in nursing home. Go look at the population in nursing home, and then they finally decline. That's because
Mm.
they have a shorter health span compared to their lifespan. And having anything beyond a healthy lifespan is miserable, in my opinion.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and we all want to have a quality of life. We also want to maintain that independence as we get older, and I think that's the functional day-to-day living that we don't want to actually give up if we can avoid it. So, what are some of the menopause mistakes that people make, or
Ah,
women, I
okay.
should say?
Funny you should say that. I actually wrote a book called Menopause Mistakes, which are 10 critical mistakes. But the first one is awareness. What you don't know. And once you're
Mm.
aware that come you're hitting 40, and we now know that women, even in their late 30s, and I've had some clients like that, are going into menopause and getting significant symptoms at that point in time. But basically, I would say 40 is a good age to say, guess what? Anything that happens to me, I'm going to menopause. Can I be prepared for it so that it doesn't take you out? The thing about
Mm.
menopause, why it's so pernicious, is that it's taking way too many people out, and they end up settling, not reaching the potential, not reaching the, not so much potential, the capacity, because they always had the
Mm.
potential, reaching their full capacity. And so they drop out of their careers, of their lives, they become a shell of their former selves, and they say, oh, yeah, when I was young. You're still young. You're going to
Mm,
live the vast proportion of your life, your adult life, as a perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal person. Fact.
mm,
Because if
mm,
you came into menopause at, let's give it 45, and average life expectancy for a woman is 85, that's 40 whole years. Puberty, okay. Uh, let's not even say puberty. When you start being really adult, let's call that even 20. So from 20 to 45, that's just 25 years. The
mm,
majority of your life is spent grappling with those things. Why wouldn't you want to make the best of it?
mm,
Because you
mm.
can.
Yes, yeah. So really, you're right. We have to find out the information and try to do what we can. And I know that sleep is a huge issue.
It's a big one.
Um, and I have I sort of go up and down with my sleep patterns. And, I've tried all the 10 ways to get a good night's sleep sort of thing. But it is such a big issue because if you don't sleep well, if you're not getting that quality sleep, it's very hard to function after a while.
Yeah,
You just feel
very true.
tired, you just feel drained, and it's hard to focus and that sort of thing. So, how do you help women who want to try and get a better night's sleep?
It's from assessing what exactly is the problem with their sleep because everybody has different things, and most people tend to think that it's just a matter of sleeping 9 hours or sleeping 7 hours. It's not necessarily true because you could sleep all those hours and still not get good quality deep sleep. You need
Mm,
certain parts of your sleep to be in balance, and you need to do it in a certain way. You need to be able to have continuous sleep, not break up your sleep. So even if you're in bed for 7 hours, your effective sleep may have only been 3 or 4 hours. It
mm,
doesn't do you much good because some of the real restorative parts of sleep come at the end of your sleep cycle, not at the beginning. The beginning is just, like a preamble, like a pre-frame, like a pre-something, get you going. The real benefits come at the end. So are you
mm,
in bed for that time? Did you get into deep sleep? Did you have, REM sleep? Did you rejuvenate? Because during sleep, you also have, apart from consolidating your memory, you also have the body repairing itself, the brain repairing itself, the brain having new pathways so that it's a whole body like washing cycle, if you like, to rejuvenate yourself. And so you need to be able to say, where am I? What am I doing wrong? Am I going to bed late? Am I eating, too late? Am I being exposed to my electronic gadgets? Am I peeing too much, drinking alcohol? There are so many things that factor into it that you have to look at and see what is it that seems to be the major factor in this case. Because trying to do everything is what undoes a lot of people. Let's
mm,
figure out what
mm,
is the major thing, take that 20% that makes 80% of the difference. And if we want to add on top of it, depending on the results, we can, but we don't have to do everything. And that, like I said, is the point of the synergistic hormone balancing system. You don't have to do everything, but you do the critical things that matter. And then if you want to make it, I guess what this sleep thing, I want to make sure that it's really, really optimal because it's important for me. For me, sleep is my number one thing. If I don't get
mm.
good sleep, it's like kryptonite above everything else. But so we determine for each individual what is your kryptonite? What can we do about it? What about it do we need to improve? Is it everything or something? There are some things I can do and it doesn't bother me about sleeping and I still have a good night's sleep. There are other things, if I do that, if I go to bed too late, it's a problem. It's
Mm,
a real problem, you know.
mm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think for me too, I if I go to bed late, I find it very difficult then to get to sleep. And so then I'm thinking probably it becomes a bit of an issue in your mind where you go, oh, I'm in bed late and I'm not sleeping and I need to get to sleep. And, so it just sort of becomes a bit of a, um, a snowball effect where
yes,
the more you want to go to sleep, the more you can't. So,
yes,
yeah, I think maintaining that for me, I need to go to bed probably about 9 o'clock, 9:30,
yeah.
and after that, if it's 10:30 or 11, yeah, I really probably don't get a good night's sleep, even though I'm tired.
Yes,
It's I'm not having as good a sleep as if I just went to bed at my
that's
normal
absolutely
time.
true. And there's a myth out there that most people who sleep late think that they're night owls. Oh boy, I hate to break it to them, but there are very few people who are true night owls, like 1-2% of the population. It's
Mm,
something they've trained themselves to believe because of the ongoing myths that I need to finish my work, I need to do this, and therefore I'll do it late, I'll party late, I'll work late, and I can make up for it over the weekend. It's a myth. There are very, very few true night owls. Most of us are going back to our ancestral times, are wake up with the sun and go to sleep with the sunset.
mm. And I think that's what we have to, think about too, because that's how it was, um, before modern age. It would be just following the seasons, following the sun, following the moon, that sort of thing, all those natural
The
life
rhythms.
cycles,
Yes.
rhythms. Yes, yes.
Yes.
So, and unfortunately, the modern world changed that. I think, I don't know if we're there again. I can see changes coming, but there was a time where women in particular felt they had to wear busyness as a badge of honor, that I can multitask so many things and I'm so good at that. And, that puts extra stress on the body. And I
Very
think
true.
that they're sort of finally starting to think, well, I don't have to be superwoman. But, that's another area as well where you feel as
It's a
if you
tough
have to
one.
be performing all the time.
It's a tough one because modern era has forced a lot of women to behave like men, to have the output. And we know because of the system and which is a bit skewed out there, that the performance of women does have to be more than their male counterparts. And in doing so, they're, as you said, busy, not just busy being busy, but what they call multitasking. And anybody
Mm,
will tell you that multitasking, going from one task to the other, actually slows you down. But try telling that to the average woman. So she gets stressed, and that sits in her body, that affects her life, her basically function, and not realizing it until it's a bit too late, until they start really decompensating because it's all too much. So it's important to educate people that there are ways of improving their productivity and their focus without attempting multiple things at the same time.
mm,
And it's,
mm,
modern society has forced that on women, unfortunately, because they end up being the caregivers at home to their children, and they want a career. And it's like, you have to do both if you want to have a career. You cannot
mm,
outsource or do anything about the children, because even people who say they have help at home
mm,
say, the husbands will say, okay, yes, I looked after the children at night and she had a girls' night out. That is not equal parenting. Equal
mm,
parenting is, oh, there is a doctor's appointment. I will book the doctor's appointment. Men rarely ever
mm,
do that. Or it's like, oh,
mm,
there's a parent teacher meeting and I will speak to the teachers so that we have prepared ground before we go there. That's equal parenting.
mm, mm. Yes, and I think that, women who are working and have a family, there's that guilt all the time, because they have to make a choice. It's sort of like, well, do I go to my child's whatever it is at school, or do I? And some, we're still not quite there where em, employers are sort of, saying, well, yes, you can go and do whatever you like with the family. It's still that uh, part where you have to make a choice, and that can affect you as well, because you're thinking, well, I'm failing in this area if I make that choice, and then I'm failing in that area if I make that choice, and then that becomes just all encompassing. You just feel down about yourself. And then if your body's going through major changes, that's just the last straw.
Exactly. And so by that time they reach that stage, a lot of them therefore feel like giving up. I can't cope. I can't continue at this pace. And they end up settling. And settling
Mm,
is one of the worst things for your psyche, because you could have been a lot better, but you had to pull back because otherwise you could see that it was going to destroy you. One thing I'll
mm,
mention though is that COVID, for all its disruptions, the fact that people were now able to work from home and a lot of
Yes.
people having remote work actually brought a level of relief to women particularly, because then
Mm.
they could arrange their things a lot more easily, whereas before they didn't have any room at all. You wanted to leave work, to go and pick up somebody at 5, 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock. It just wasn't possible. Now you can
Mm.
arrange your schedule such that at least a good chunk of the time you can do that.
Yes, and there's not that commute where you have to, because that's sort of uh, depending on
Yes.
how long your commute is, that's eating into your day and time as well. So,
Yes.
yes, I do think that, you know, uh, having to stay home during the pandemic it did have some benefits to it.
Mm.
There was some obviously negative, but I think the working from home did take a lot of the pressure off. Although I notice out here in Australia now, there is some, I think more in the government positions, they're trying to
Get people
stop
back.
that now. They want them
Yeah.
back. But
Yes.
personally, I thought it worked really well. I mean, we've got
You
the
talk to people.
technology,
Yeah.
and you've got people who are less stressed because they're not trying to be rushing here, there, and everywhere. And I think, there are benefits to that. Obviously, there are some positions where you can't work from
True.
home,
True.
but for those that can, I really don't see the negative side of it, because if they're still getting their work done and the productivity is there,
Hmm.
it's probably better productivity than if they were going into the
Exactly.
office.
Exactly. And I personally feel that for that, it's a matter of control.
Mm,
Um, and there are two things I feel. One is control, one is, and for the more commercial aspects, it's commercial real estate and how expensive commercial real estate. So you have here
yeah.
in, Canada, we have buildings that are virtually empty. All the kind of hustle and bustle that used to happen are no longer happening because people, a good percentage of people are working from home. And how do they
Mm,
justify those large, for instance, food courts, coffee shops that were
mm,
subsisting on workers being there and just rushing down from those, towers and office cubicles to have a break
mm.
here, a snack there, a lunch here, etc. And commercial real estate prices, how could they justify them? So they want them back. That is the more private
Yes.
enterprises. For the
Yeah.
government and for a lot of people, it's about control. It's about, and I've experienced this directly, so I know it, where you can do the work from home. You've done it efficiently. It's so much better. But your boss wants you to see you and to feel that, oh, I have control over you. And it's like, hey,
Yes.
you know, it's not a good idea. And particularly for women, the men want to think, oh, yeah, the women, they just treat them like secretaries, if you like. And there's nothing wrong with being a secretary, don't get me wrong. It's
No.
just they want to have this kind of hierarchical power over them. And it
Mm.
becomes a power, it becomes an ego trip. So, how are we going to get out of this? It's by getting through menopause and being our best selves ever. There is no other way around it.
Mm, mm. And we can be. We might all be work in progress, but every little improvement that we make in our life, whether no matter how small, is going to have that cumulative effect, and we're going to build on that base. Now, we've been chatting for a while, and I've
Ooh,
thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I love
yeah.
the energy that you bring. And what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing the notes, your book, and you also have a pack that you like to, or an offering that you're giving to the listeners that I think it's the first chapter of your book. You've got something on sleep, you've got other things as well. So it's
Yeah.
it's very informative. So I
Mm.
thank you for that. So all of that will be put in the show notes, and also how people can contact you.
Yes.
I'm presuming that you do a lot of this work online, so you're not
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
just relegated to just face to face. You can do it internationally,
Yes.
I suppose. Yeah.
Internationally, because women are busy and you're trying to get them results, which you can get them without being face to face. It's not medical. That's what I always stress to people. This is
No.
something that will help them, but they're not patients, and that's the mistake. A lot of people seem to think that because going to a physician And I've seen too many people like that. Does not necessarily give you the answers you want. I went to a physician, even though I'm one myself, and
Mm,
did her best, but it wasn't the right thing for me. Let's put it like
no,
that.
no,
Um,
that's right.
and so it is having developed it through research, trial and error. I'm the guinea pig, if you like, and also utilizing natural techniques, modern techniques to make sure that they can get an efficient and relatively lower effort than all the alternatives you're giving out there. Because, like I said, it is synergistic. You can't just take one thing. You have to take what is a basket of things and optimize them
Mm,
in a way that works for the unique individual.
mm. And I think also the point about how women during this perimenopause time are busy, they don't want to have to cope with a lot of scientific information if they
Oh,
don't have to. They probably want someone to just say, here you go. But I know it's not quite as simple as that. But by being able to talk to someone like yourself and say, well, look, these are the things that I'm experiencing. And for you then to say, well, okay, let's have a look at that. Let's break it down. Let's bring in little bits here and there that's going to help you get an initial base going. Because I think that's what people need. They need that. They know they're not going to find a cure overnight. So
hmm,
you need to take those small steps. And once you see little improvements, that's going to build on your well-being in your mental state as well, because you're going to see some results, as long as you realize they're not going to happen overnight, because you've spent a whole lifetime maybe not
yes.
addressing those issues.
Yeah, but I will say that, with this particular system, I have clients who are getting results in, for instance, coming off sleeping pills in like about, what was it, 5 days, was it?
Wow.
And this was a colleague, by the way, or getting to a stage where they come in and they say, oh my God, I can sleep well, I'm calm, I'm, fitter, and all in less than 8 weeks. So it is not just a starter, it is well down the road to taking you
Mm,
where you want to be. Plus, you end
mm,
up with a blueprint, with a
mm,
framework that
mm.
is
That,
yours.
yeah, and that you can probably take on past menopause, like
Absolutely.
postmenopause as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
that sounds great. So, look, I do have a question that I ask all of my guests, but before I do that, is there anything that we haven't covered or a point that you'd like to make before we start to close the show?
Just one thing that came to me when I heard something about, donations in the place, and it's about generational wealth. We know generational wealth helps lift societies, gives them something good, gives them, plants a seed for the next generation. And then beyond that, that's what generational wealth is all about: learning, knowledge, and whatever, the ability to do things. But almost all of it is built by is built by men. I beg your pardon. Almost all of it. The ability to build generational wealth is turbocharged as women are going through menopause. And if that is taken away from them, the only people who end up building it is men, because that's the point at which, at your 40s, is when you're getting to the zenith of your career, when you're having high energy, high income capacity, and you can compound that over the years to become generational wealth. Now you lose that and you can never catch up. So it's the
Mm,
men who are able to build that generational wealth off the backs of women, by the way. And the women themselves are not even barely able to, okay, I've saved enough money for the family, and we can send, John to college, and we can get, whoever got married. But building true legacy into the
mm,
future um,
mm.
depends on taking your charge now and making sure that you don't get pulled down by perimenopause and menopause.
Mm. And the other thing that's happening too, not in a lot of areas, but there's a start where the conversation is being held within the workplace. And I don't know if it was the UK. I think that they've brought in menopause leave or things like that when, they didn't even want to talk about it at some point. But now women who are suffering can, take time off if they need to without it being a stigma. I think there's still a bit of a stigma there. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding,
There is.
especially and we need to talk to men. They need to understand it as
Yes.
well as women. So while we're
Yes.
educating ourselves, we should be educating our partners, our sons,
Absolutely.
our male counterparts, so that they have an understanding and realize that it's not a disease. It's just a part of life, and it's just and we're not it's a bit like pregnancy as well. People tend to think, oh, she's got a disease or she's not well, and really you're
It's just
fine. You're
natural.
just going
It's
through a
just
natural
fine.
part of life. So
Yes.
yeah, lots of that for educating ourselves. So look, it's been lovely having you joining me today, Dr. Tayo, and as I said, I love your energy. You obviously believe in in what you're doing and helping women. So in saying that, I wanted to ask you, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Living to my full capacity. It means, being my best, expressing myself as best as I can. Whatever I do, expressing yourself and being of, having a purpose and expressing that purpose and living that purpose. That's what it means. It doesn't involve being in competition with anything or comparing myself to anybody or whatever. It just means developing your best self.
I love that. And the fact is that, we're human and we do compare ourselves to others, but if we only realized what, our unique qualities ourselves and believing in that, that certainly takes a lot of pressure off as well. So I really love that answer. So thank you for joining me today, Dr. Tayo. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, and I've written down quite a few notes here, and I know the readers would definitely, listeners would definitely have taken away some good points.
Mm.
I look
Yeah.
forward to perhaps chatting to you again in the future, and I'd encourage everyone to check out your book and the links to what I'm going to be leaving in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Well, that was a very energetic interview that I had with Dr. Tayo. She's full of energy and she does believe in what she's doing to help women. She is a professional doctor, but this is something that she is doing for women in a natural way. So I'd encourage you to perhaps read her book and also to check out her website and her offerings. So what she's offering today is a link to a pack that she has, which is the Dynamic Woman Sleep and Fat Burning Menopause Power Pack. Now that sounds good. We talked about sleep and what we can do to ensure a better night's sleep, but we also talked about all things perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause. So I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. I know I did, and I still learn things even today. And I hope that you'll share the episode with a friend, because I'm sure they will benefit as well, or perhaps their daughters will. So that's it for another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.